Alrighty, everybody. Good afternoon. As folks are joining us here, we're going to go ahead and get started so we can have the majority of our time here for our great speaker here today. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Rachel Ellenberger. I am a program consultant with GEO. And always, as always, before I pass this off to Michael, I have just a quick few bits of housekeeping. This session is being recorded like our other sessions. It will be posted on the Geo YouTube later this week. We ask that everybody who are not our speakers, please keep your video and your microphones off for the duration of the session. If you have any questions that can't wait until our Q&A section at the end, feel free to drop those in the chat. Michael and I will be monitoring them there and make sure that they are answered at the end. And at the end during our Q&A, we'll be calling on folks as well. If you're having any technical issues, feel free to email me. I will also put my email there in the chat. And as I turn this over to Michael, as always, if folks would like to add where they are located in Ohio into the chat here, we'd love to see where everybody is calling in from. With that, I will turn that over to Michael.
All right, good afternoon. Michael Benson from Green Energy Ohio. I'm the board president, and this session is going to be all about microgrid financing. I will be the host, but we had some changes with some speakers today, so I'm also going to do a little bit of speaking in the beginning, but the star is really going to be Heather Gray, who I'm going to introduce here in a minute. But what we're going to talk about is the fun stuff for those of us who actually like finance or accounting and those kind of things. That's going to be the conversation today, not as much excitement about all the technology and the design and all this kind of fun stuff. But it is going to be interesting if you understand or want to understand how in the world we actually make these things happen for municipalities without having to just rely on getting a grant, that kind of stuff. So we're going to discuss resiliency and how that actually can provide you with revenue and value. Then allows you to just go ahead and buy these things if you want to, because they are investments. You can use your community money to do it. You don't have to have community energy passed to be able to do that. We'll talk about that a little bit. You probably understand the concept of a power purchasing agreement where somebody will build something for you, then sell you the energy that it makes. And that then also ties into an as a service model, which we'll talk about. And of course, the big part is going to be the energy savings performance contract. The little cheater or little blurb about that ahead of time is that allows you to fix your buildings first so that you can then have the microgrids built on top of them. So it really is kind of important for most municipalities who have had to defer maintenance for a long time on their infrastructure. So, all right. Here are our official speakers. Heather Garay is a partnership executive with Leopardo Efficiency, where she works with municipalities to structure, finance, and deliver complex energy and infrastructure initiatives, including microgrids and resilience-focused capital programs. With a background in municipal finance and public procurement, she helps local governments align energy solutions with budgetary, statutory, and operational priorities. Previously, she served as the controller for the city of Hammond, Indiana, so she has been us and working in the municipal space. And she led a $29.6 million multi-phase energy and operational conservation program across 13 facilities in that municipality. And as the city's lead liaison, she oversaw financial analysis, stakeholder coordination, and approval processes. At Leopardo, Heather has supported the municipal finance administrative teams in Cleveland, North Olmsted, Cuyahoga Falls, and South Euclid, all in Ohio, assisting with budget analysis, authorized financing structures, and legislative approvals to deliver cost-effective, resilient energy solutions. In other words, she knows how to get this stuff done. Heather holds a Juris Doctorate, excuse me, from Northern Illinois University College of Law and a Bachelor of Arts from Valparaiso. We won't hold the law degree against her. She is dedicated to advancing sustainable solutions and empowering communities to achieve long-term energy resilience through financially responsible strategies. I love it. Love its responsibility and resiliency. Love those two. For me, in addition to being the board president for Green Energy Ohio, I am an electrification consultant for local governments, leveraging an award-winning 30-year career in public service with innovations that simultaneously improve service and lower costs. And electrification is where I'm working at now, which means switching away from fossil fuel power to electric and developing an infrastructure necessary for that transition, which is microgrids, which is why we're having this series. My partner and I actually patented the mission critical microgrid design to ensure that municipalities have robust, resilient energy systems to support their electrification programs. So let's get into it because we have a lot to cover. I'm going to spend a little time here because most people don't think about how resiliency is actually a value, an economic value, but also an operational value, and how it actually will affect or can affect your financing of this type of infrastructure. So we're going to spend a little time on this. When you think of resiliency, how do you define it? You can look up bunch of different ways. It all comes from a different perspective that you have. The one I like is that you can be hit with what's worst or the worst that can come to you and still survive and still operate. And for a municipality, that means you are the disaster responder. You have to have systems that even in the face of a disaster, you will be able to respond and mitigate and help everyone in your community because you have a different level of requirement as a municipality or as a public safety or as the military. You all have a life safety level of responsibility, and that's beyond commercial industrial, that's beyond residential and education. Even healthcare does not have a community-wide life safety, health and well-being responsibility, but you do as a municipality. So what you do and how you do it to retain that resilience and make sure that you can respond can be built on your critical infrastructure. You're also responsible to keep that up and running and harden it against attacks. Uh, your essential services function out of buildings and properties. They are available to be cyber attacked. You probably all had the recent cyber attack training. My understanding is that's now a new requirement for municipalities. They actually have to be certified in that. We're dealing with a world currently that's quite up in the air. We don't know what could be coming any day now from any bad actor around the world. It can now get to you through the internet any way they want. So you need to be able to have a system that can withstand that type of stuff. That's what resiliency really means. Because of that, and this is where it ties into the financing, because resiliency is an essential component for you, you have to build your systems bigger, more powerful than a typical microgrid would be, or a typical system would be. In other words, you're building it for that bad day. So if you're a Hurricane Sandy community or a Hurricane Helene, which we're going to talk about in session 6, when those types of things happen, you need to be able to still operate and respond. Because of that, you're going to get something that most people would not have, and there's a value to it. So the economic example, let's say this was a commercial operation and you made widgets that produced $1,000 an hour in revenue. In over 8 hours is $8,000, and over a week, $40,000 of revenue. You lose an hour, you lose a day, you lose a week. That's how much that costs you for a commercial operation. You can't do that with people's lives. People's lives have a much bigger level of value. But what's interesting is you can measure uptime. And what I mean by uptime is, what percentage of time are you going to make sure that you operate? That's a common thing for communications, for data centers to have uptime. But there's also an interesting tool that you may not be aware of. There is a tool that's available for people to get to if you know how to use it. That's called the ICE calculator, not that ICE stuff you see in the news. ICE calculator is interruption calculator. They can actually determine what is the economic effect on a community when you lose power. So I punched in some numbers for a community I've been doing a little bit of research on and what they typically have, like how many hours and how many times a year the power goes out. And their estimated interruption costs is about $1.4 million to that community from 2 interruptions in a couple of hours. It's a huge effect that people don't realize. The majority of that is from commercial. And what's really interesting is this is a bedroom community. Out of the actual people that are tied to the electric grid, 2,300 actual meters or properties, only 100 or so are commercial. But that 100 commercial was over $1 million because it's such a big effect when they have power go out. And that does not include, this calculator does not include the big outages that we've had from big winter storms where it lasts for days. This is just regular outages over a year's time frame. So in other words, resiliency and what you build in from your municipality into your system affects your community across the board. And it does have value cash wise and life safety and well being wise. So I just wanted to make sure we all understood that resiliency does equal money, whether you want to think of it that way or not. So for municipalities, there's a way to look at it for how you can find revenue from that resilience value. So here are two examples. Basically, you're going to use energy storage, that battery that we always talk about as the basis for a microgrid, and you are going to consider, let's use that battery every afternoon so you can lower or eliminate demand charges on your bills. You can also use the solar that you're going to put on your roof that charges the battery that also can be used in those afternoons and lower those costs. And then that solar, when you have more than you need, will fill up that battery again to use for the next day. So it's a very, very efficient way to manage your own energy if it's sized appropriately that you have it available to use on a daily basis. You can also use that battery to move where you use your energy. You can discharge it in the afternoon when energy is most expensive, but then charge it up at night when it's a lot cheaper on time of use rates. That's called load shifting. That's moving the load from one time to another. But the microgrid gives you the value in both of those operations. Now, this example that I'm showing is just for your property, but this exists as well for the electric grid across the board. So PJM is our regional transmission market. So you can see those big, huge transmission lines go across the state, actually over multiple states. That's PJM. PJM is the one who raised all of our rates because they need more capacity onto the grid. So if you build a system that has extra energy available at peak times of the day or the year, so those are certain days that are really, really expensive days to operate the electric grid, you can sell energy back at dollars that cost you cents. So it's called energy arbitrage, and it's available to you in the energy markets of PJM. And I've gave a few examples there with the capacity markets, reactive markets. You don't need to understand how all that stuff works. Virtual power plant operators know how to do this. So your system that was built for resiliency to protect your community and your infrastructure provides you the opportunity for revenue. And you can include that in your calculations when you decide, how do I finance a microgrid? So here's an example. You could just use traditional, plain old, buy it, get a loan, do a bond, whatever it is you want to do, and count that revenue from your resilience as a value in your calculations. This is an investment, which means you're not actually purchasing it with capital expenses. You could, if you wanted to, use investment funds because there's a return on the investment. You're monetizing sunshine when you put solar on your roof or operate that battery. Charge it when it's cheap, discharge it when it's expensive. Very good ways for you to be able to turn revenue out of your resiliency. And of course, you can actually have your community pay for it. So the thing that's kind of a misnomer is community energy, the bill that's currently in Ohio's legislature, will allow people to go ahead and purchase clean energy that they couldn't build on their own property for themselves and basically kind of crowdsource that funding. Well, you can crowdsource funding for projects anyway. Basically, you're just an investor. But you can invest using Climatize as the example, climatize.earth, if you want to go look it up. You can actually invest in the energy that's going to be built, that system in your community on your community's infrastructure. So you aren't necessarily stopped from doing that, or we don't require that legislation to be in place, but that legislation will definitely kick this up a notch. It'll make it a lot more available, and developers will come in and use that opportunity. And it makes it a much, much bigger opportunity across the state, which would be good for all of us. But my best part, or my favorite part of all this stuff, that revenue, that value means you can use other people's money to pay for this. You don't have to type your capital. You don't have to spend your own money. Just before we came on, Heather and I were talking, and the idea is perhaps you can use hyperscalers to do this. And for those of you who don't know what a hyperscaler is, we will touch that at the end. Those are the folks who want to use a bunch of the grid and need that capacity to be added, and they can help pay for what you need to do to make it happen. So here's the last slide I'm going to cover, and then we're going to switch it over to Heather. If you have not heard of energy as a service, it was invented by a local government. So Montgomery County, Maryland, back in 2016, so 10 years ago, developed microgrids as a service that's now called energy as a service. And they worked an energy services company and they worked with a financier to figure out we could build microgrids that have value through resilience and of course through generation and storage and be able to sell that energy back to the municipality. So the municipality would get resilience, not have to pay for it, and then meanwhile, they would purchase the energy from the energy services company that built it. In other words, the microgrids got built for free and they just bought the energy that they were buying anyway, but now they're buying their energy and no increase in cost. There's no increase in expense for them to do it. The original one in the bottom left there is the public safety headquarters in Montgomery County, Maryland. They had solar and they had a combined heat and power plant, which means they use natural gas generation. The interesting thing is they did that because 10 years ago, the economics were not as good for batteries. But on the right-hand side at the top right, that's their most recent microgrid. That one is on a transit center. It's actually their second transit center. The first one that they did allows them to no longer buy diesel buses. They're all buying all electric or hydrogen buses. And this one has solar and battery storage and an electrolyzer for hydrogen. And it does use the existing generator because you don't just throw those things out. They do have value. And of course, we recommend that for any municipality that still has a generator that's in good nick and good operation. But they're going to have 200 electric buses out of that center, and that's their second one that they built in Montgomery County, Maryland. So they have, I think, somewhere around 9 or 10 microgrids in this county, and they have paid zero capital for any of them because they use other people's money with the energy as a service contract. But a lot of these things, the buildings were relatively newer. They built a new center. If you have older buildings and you have the situation we have in most places in Ohio, then a better option for you is something called an energy savings performance contract. And that is all on Heather, and I'm going to get out of her way.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. As Michael said, I'm Heather Gray, former city controller for Hammond, Indiana, which I hear may be the future home of the Chicago Bears. We'll see. But I was working as city controller about over a decade ago when I was introduced to Leopardo. We had gone through some difficult transitions with some legislation that caused us to lose a lot of revenue. And so we were dealing with some deferred maintenance and a lot of needs in our buildings and fleet. And Leopardo came in with a solution that I honestly said is too good to be true. But after a lot of convincing and working through the numbers with them, found a lot of value in this program and eventually asked to join the team. So today we're going to cover a few items specifically related to how you can advance your resiliency and sustainability goals using an ESPC or an energy savings performance contract. A lot of people want to take the next step and invest in this technology, but they need to take care of their foundation first. So that's really what we're going to talk about. So if we can go ahead to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the program itself. So what is an energy savings performance contract? The ideal concept is to evaluate what your operational costs are today. If you're running deferred maintenance, if you have old infrastructure, old buildings, old equipment, old fleet, those things cost more. You have emergency repairs and maintenance, and it takes more energy to run them, and they're just less efficient. So the cost to operate your facilities are higher than they would be if you were to make an investment in improving that technology, that equipment, that infrastructure. So the whole point of this program is to partner with a contractor, an ESCO like ourselves, who would come in, do an analysis for you, and recommend implementation of certain solutions that would increase your efficiency, not only energy-wise, but operationally. And then those savings would be measured and then can be used to finance the improvements themselves. So you get to use that savings to back the improvement implementation, and then any surplus savings generated flow to you as a municipality. So this was really brought on through the school districts who had a lot of facilities that were aging back in the 80s and didn't have a way to raise funds to improve them. So the legislatures got together and decided to provide this, what I consider really a financing tool, to allow them to leverage those savings, working with a qualified provider to make those improvements and ensure that the financing would be measured, would be verified, and would be backed by the contractor's guarantee. And it was very successful through the school districts that they expanded it to municipalities and other local government entities and nonprofits. And so it's really been something in place since the early 80s. But a lot of people haven't leveraged it to its full capacity. And so that's what we're really trying to change today is how do you improve all of your infrastructure so that you can take that next step and achieve some of your resiliency and sustainability goals as well. I'm going to go to the next one for me. So how do we do that? We look at this in a very comprehensive way. So many contractors come in and want to focus on one or two items. So back in the day, it was LED light bulbs. And now most places have had that converted through most of their public buildings. But the bigger items, things like your roofing, things like your building facade, your HVAC upgrades, those are things that have a longer payback or a higher cost associated with replenishing them. And so when we take those things like the quick payback items like lighting and building controls, and other operational savings streams and combine them, we really can get the most value out of your program. We've worked with communities that have taken that step and they wanted to pursue solar and they worked with a solar contractor and kind of piecemealed that approach. But when we came in to do an ESPC evaluation, we recognized that their roof was completely failing. So they invested all this money on a solar array and put it on a really bad asset. So we're helping them now to improve the structural integrity of their building. We actually are taking that solar array off, completely replacing the roof, and then we're going to put that solar array back on with minimal downtime to lessen that revenue loss that they're achieving from that solar array. But those are the types of things that we can look at through an ESPC, where we can do a long-term planning, more than just addressing your immediate needs, but really looking at a capital plan, a sustainability plan for you long-term to provide that long-term value. And one of the solutions that we bring to the table here that has been very helpful and really driving savings for communities is procurement. So what we mean by that, we'll get into a little bit later, but essentially evaluating how we can help you to procure your goods and services more strategically and capturing those savings within an ESPC program to apply those savings to scope work and to your goals that have a higher price tag associated with them. Things like the building infrastructure and preparation for things like solar or microgrids technology. So really a comprehensive approach is where you're going to get the most value out of this program. Go ahead, you can do the next one. Some other benefits that you get from utilizing this program. And again, as I say, I'll say it a million times, it's a financing tool to us. We take that approach of how do we get the most for your money? How can we grow that investment that you're making in your own facilities? And using a traditional construction method, there's a lot of responsibility and risk that's placed on the municipality. So really, in that scenario, your general contractor may be in charge of the design engineering and the project management, but you as the municipality have to take on the scheduling, the financing, the performance risk, the cost risk. How many times have you started a project and then a change order comes down the pipeline and you've either had to figure out whether you can move forward with a project or take away from another plan in order to continue? I know personally, when I was working as a city controller, I also served on our board of public works and safety. I served as the president for a few years and saw many, many contracts come through that entity. And I saw many, many change orders come through that entity. And it was a strange position to be in, being the financial director, having to deal with the financial implications of the proposals that were coming before the board, because I knew that they were valuable proposals, but I also had to figure out how to balance the budget in order to accommodate what would likely be a much larger project cost down the road. When you're using performance contracting, that risk is completely taken off your plate. It's all built in. There's a guaranteed cost associated with that. And part of the reason why we're able to control that cost better is because of the ability to schedule and finance and design from start to finish. So working with an ESCO, if you really do it using it as a financial tool, you would have your team that would work with you from the very beginning to develop and design what is your long-term plan for your facilities, for your community, for your sustainability and resiliency goals, and how do we put together a program that achieves as many of those as possible. And through the legislation itself, we're required to guarantee all of the results, the cost, and the savings. So it really shifts that risk from you as the municipality and in turn your residents to the contractor. So it's a great tool to utilize for just that risk mitigation alone. It also gives you that single point of accountability. If you were to try to do a project like the ones we did in my community, we were in 13 different facilities at one time. And I can tell you, honestly, it was one of the smoothest projects I was ever a part of during my time with the city. And really, that was because we had one go-to person who managed the project at every level. So if we were to do all of the scope of work on our own and piecemeal it, then we would have to, go if there was a leak, it may be, the roofer, it might be the internal facade, and it might be the window company. So doing it in a program like this gives you as a municipality one clear point of accountability and a process in which that you can have that corrected if there are any issues. It also allows for this progress to move forward without any upfront capital, which is very attractive for a lot of communities, who are trying to do more with less these days. So a wonderful program that really shifts the risk and shifts that clear vision to the contractor working with you as opposed to you having to manage all of it. And all of this is done through Ohio Revised Code 71702. Most communities, most states have legislation very similar to that. Almost every state in the United States has similar legislation. I will say from my experience, Ohio has some very good legislation here. When I was working in my community, I like to say the state legislature doesn't always give you a lot of gifts. This is one that they're giving you, so take it and take advantage of it. And Ohio's, I think, is an even bigger present, so to speak. It has a lot of flexibility. It allows you to really evaluate what is going to be best for your community and how you can implement those solutions. But the biggest thing that comes out of this legislation, again, is this guarantee. And I like to call it a 3 guarantee promise. It's a guaranteed project cost, so no change orders coming your way unless they are driven by you. We've had communities who have said, we'd like to expand on this, and that is allowable. But once our project costs are set into the contract, there are no change orders due to change in labor or materials cost. There's also the guarantee savings aspect. So absolutely everything in these programs for us are measured and verified, not only upfront at the contracting process, but then on an annual basis so that they can be verified that you're getting the results that you need. And because the savings are guaranteed and required to be guaranteed through the statute, we need that equipment to be working. So there's a guarantee equipment performance involved in this as well. So really, you have a partner that works with you, as I said, from start to end, and even beyond that to verify that the equipment is functioning on the top level all the way through the life of the program. So really a great opportunity for you to make those improvements within your facilities, get ready for the technology that you want to implement, microgrid technology, solar technology, battery storage technology, any of those things that you've been talking about with Michael through this program. Ensure that your foundation is strong before you take that next step and invest your resources into your sustainability plan. These things can really go hand in hand. And then this next slide here, we're going to talk about the financial aspects, which I really, as a city controller, appreciated. Number one, it requires no upfront capital. What the whole goal of this program is to take what's already being spent in your budget today in a less efficient manner and find ways to improve upon that efficiency. So as I said, things like building maintenance, emergency replacement and repair costs, capital budget plans, and then strategic procurement. All of those things combined with the energy savings that can be achieved through the implementation of energy saving technology to cover the cost of these payments. And there's many flexible financing solutions that you can utilize. You are more than welcome to do this as a traditional geo bond, which most people are familiar with. However, I personally don't think that's always the best plan. Some scenarios it works great for communities, but there are other options that are specifically called out in the legislation that you are able to utilize that gives you a lot of flexibility. The most prominent one is the tax exempt equipment leases. And a couple of things about that really make it attractive for most communities is that it's excluded from your net indebtedness. So what that means is that it counts as off the balance sheet debt. It doesn't count against your bonding capacity. I like to say you can preserve those for some of your fun projects, but really allows you to take care of your internal facilities without having to impact any other projects that are in your pipeline. And so there's a reduced issuance cost associated with this type of financing as well as an accelerated closing process. So it's faster, it costs less to issue, and it can be something that can be excluded from your debt calculation. So that's what makes this type of financing very attractive for a lot of people. And I did see that there was a question that popped up there, so I'm going to take a look at that real quick before I move on to the other aspects of this. Is there a need for and no recourse loans for improvement projects? I'm not quite sure exactly if maybe you can add a little bit there. I think maybe it came in a little fast.
We can also handle that one at the end. We'll
Yeah,
go ahead
okay.
and log it,
Sorry.
and if we need more explanation, we'll do that back in the
Yeah,
chat with you. Go ahead,
sorry. I
Heather.
didn't know if it was on specifically something we were looking at right here. So,
Yeah, we're
um,
good.
also wanted to mention to you, I know Michael has talked about the energy as a service revenue. So that is definitely something that could be pulled into this program. So there's a lot of flexibility, as I said. So that could be counted towards the total program savings, and captured through that pledge, for a financing, or could offset the cost of the total financing for those improvements. It allows you to have these fixed payments, with from a finance perspective, that for a finance perspective, having that fixed payment as opposed to not knowing whether or not change orders come through down the road and having to manage that, it really is a big benefit for your budget planning process. Also, it's compatible with capital contributions. We have some communities who would like to put in some capital from their capital plans in order to offset the total financing costs, and that's 100% allowable. We're also there to help you secure any grants or rebates that might be available to you, connected to the improvements that you're interested in implementing. And one of the other great things about this program, we as a company, our strategy at least is to be very conservative with our savings. We want you to achieve the savings, and we want to see that success. And any surplus savings that are generated through the program go directly to the municipality to roll into further project work, to fill budget holes, or to apply toward another project entirely. So surplus savings go to you without restriction. And then finally, again, the ESCO guarantees the savings. So part of this evaluation when you're underwriting this particular debt is the lender being comfortable with our ability to pay any shortfall payments. So if we don't achieve the savings that you were guaranteed through the contract, in the measurement and verification process identifies that a shortfall has occurred, the contractor is required to issue you a check for that payment. So this is as long as the measurement and verification process is in place and can last up to 20 years of the program. So really a great financial tool, as I said, to creatively finance improvements within your own facility and infrastructure needs, utilizing this to avoid taking up your debt capacity and bonding capacity, and really giving yourself that peace of mind with mitigating the risk, giving the guarantees on the performance of the equipment, the savings, and the cost altogether. So if we want to go to the next slide, this one here, I know Michael mentioned that you guys have looked already through this program. One of the communities that we are currently meeting with Michael and developing some resiliency solutions for them. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the scope slides in particular, but just wanted to give you a little bit of background in case this is your first webinar that you're joining from this series, or if you weren't able to make the one that included this. So this is a community that we are working with in Florida. And we're looking at 4 of their facilities, looking at ways that we need to improve the structural components of those facilities to get ready for an expansion of their solar systems. They have a big interest in improving their electrification. They have some EV fleet, and they really are looking at ways in which they can expand on that solution, and how do they take on that challenge. So we're not going to go through their particular facility solutions, but we're going to go real quickly through the resiliency and energy efficiency solutions that we are exploring with them. So EV charging, renewables, energy monitoring and automation, and energy storage. This is a community that's very interested in being smart city. They want access to this data. So this program is wonderful because it also gives you that financial transparency of the savings, showing you where the dollars are actually attached to the savings that you're achieving through your energy efficiency solutions. But also we can implement solutions that can help you with your energy monitoring and automation, so that you have access to get that info and share that with your residents about the energy achievements that are resulting from this program. So if we want to go through this next one, and Michael, please feel free to hop in here. I know you're very familiar with some of this information that we put together for them. So looking at upgrading their EV charging infrastructure to level 3. This is proposed at their garage, a youth center, and their public works facility. As I mentioned, they have a green fleet, but they want to expand upon that. So looking at ways that we can help them do that through this program. I think the next solution is looking at solar. So really using every opportunity of their city-owned building roof space. They have the benefit of being in Florida, so they're getting a lot of that sun. But really, how can we capture the energy with the solar arrays and utilize that energy in ways to be the most valuable to them as a community? And so we're looking at expansion of solar at 3 different facilities here.
As an aside, for those who do not know, you may notice that these roofs are almost completely covered in solar. They're able to do that because they're not limited by net metering because it's part of a microgrid, which means it's attached to storage. So they can produce far more than they actually need, and that goes to the whole resiliency perspective. So you'll notice there's a reason that these buildings are almost completely covered in solar is because of it's part of a microgrid and not limited by net metering rules. So really smart stuff.
Yeah, and absolutely. We had a lot of conversations with their sustainability director about redundancy. And Michael, you mentioned that we're going to discuss some natural disaster situations when you need that power most. And they experience hurricane seasons, and that certainly is a time in which they want to have this backup, power source for their public safety, for their public works, so that they can keep things operational. They also are a backup source for other smaller communities near them. And so this is very important to them that they are able to establish a program in which that they're, not only meeting their energy needs, but having that ability to store it, potentially sell it back to other entities, and also be able to provide services during those peak times. So again, here's energy monitoring and building automation. They like to be very transparent, give their residents, they even talked about with their charging station expansion, that they would like to have some kind of dashboard that showed in real time the energy use that savings that they've been achieving through this program. So very focused on giving this information to the public. It's definitely something you can do through an ESPC program. And then the battery energy storage, looking at this at their public works facility, they are looking to move their larger vehicles onto EV, platforms. So looking at how do we increase their ability to store energy and really operate that plant and all of its equipment more efficiently. So a little background there, just kind of what we're looking at. And then finally, again, the procurement solutions that I've mentioned. This is something unique to Leopardo Efficiency. We've seen communities have a need for more strategic procurement. I come from that world. I know that you guys are handcuffed by a lot of rules and regulations and how you spend public money, and for good reason. But I've also seen a lot of procurement divisions within municipalities either be completely reduced to 1 or 2 people or eliminated. And there's a lot of siloed purchasing going on. So there's a lot of opportunity while maintaining all of the legal requirements that you have to meet for your purchases of goods and services. There's a lot of strategic purchasing opportunities available to communities that simply don't have the staff, the time, or quite frankly, the specific technology. And so, looking at ways that we can help drive more strategic purchasing decisions and capturing that through an energy savings performance contract. So you can utilize those savings to make the improvements within your facilities and towards your technology investments for resilient infrastructure. So here, just kind of give you an idea of how this all works. So it's all the scope of work we walk through a little bit. And when we break this out, this is still at a very high level with this community at what we call our feasibility level. But when we break out where we feel the savings are going to come from, it's coming from 2 main sources. And it's the utility savings, meaning the reduced energy costs that they would be paying due to implementing the solar panels on their facilities, the storage, the EV technology. And then the rest of that is really operational costs. And that includes that procurement. So using this program, you're able to capture that again as savings, combine those savings together, apply them to the scope of work that you want. And this through an ESPC is the only way that you can really back a financial structure with the savings themselves. And so that's why it's a really good program to use to make these improvements, to fortify your facilities, and to really make a good investment into sustainability and resiliency technology. We also do have an opportunity for credits here, and I believe that's all connected to the battery storage. But what we'll do next in this process is take a look at our budget items. So you see here our budget items of utilities and operational expenses, which is a very, very high level roll up of many, many thousands of line items that we looked at that would be potentially impacted by this project. We know what their budgeted amount is for each of these spend categories, and then you'll see our guaranteed savings that would be part of the program should they make those project implementations. And what happens then through the appropriation transfer process, they would be sent to a designated fund, those savings that are done through the program, and then those are used to pay the debt service. So you can see here that there's about $3,000 annual surplus on this particular scenario that would go to the city. But the whole point of this program is for the savings themselves to cover the costs of the improvements, and any additional savings go to you as the community. So we'll show you a quick cash flow on the next slide of how that works specifically. So again, remembering where those savings are coming from: utilities savings, so energy savings, operational savings, which the repair, maintenance, procurement, and potential credits and rebates, all are captured in here. And the way this is typically structured is on a 15 or a 20-year debt service schedule that is, up to the community and how it cash flows best. Typically, when you see these, you work with a lender who understands an ESPC and understands that it's going to take some time for the construction process to happen. And so we build in a period in which you're not making a debt service payment, and you're also generating savings and accumulating them in preparation for your first debt service payment. So that's called that 0 year, the construction period year. So you're generating the cumulative cash flow in preparation for your debt service payment. And so the statute requires that, again, that the cost of the improvements be covered by the savings themselves over the life of the improvements. Most of the improvements have a 20+ lifespan. So that's why it's very typical to see these go out anywhere between 10 to 20 years, depending upon the size of the project and how much the community wants to finance. But you can see here in this scenario that the total guaranteed savings over the life of the equipment and the life of the program is $32 million. And the costs of those improvements are just under $20 million. So the cumulative net surplus savings is $12.5 million. So not only are they making an investment of over $15 million into their infrastructure towards their resiliency, redundancy, and renewable goals, but they're also netting $12 million over the life of the project that they can use for anything the city wants. So really great opportunity to evaluate money you're spending today and apply it to future investment.
As usual, Heather is amazing. I looked up non-recourse loans. I think this is specific to real estate. Uh, Edward. I did a quick look and it because Heather immediately did the what are you talking about? I'm pretty sure local governments probably don't do this. Local governments usually will finance debt based on expected revenue, issuing bonds, raising taxes, that kind of stuff. They don't put up the fire station as collateral. Does that make sense? You're not going to say, hey, my fire station's worth $10 million, so I'm going to do a loan on the fire station because you default the loan. What are you going to do? Give them the fire station? So I don't think non-recourse specifically hits. Then anybody who knows better than me, please, let us know what that actually means. But all right, so quick review. This, by the way, finance, huge, complicated. Just looking at the way the money has to flow if you're using an energy savings performance contract, understanding that resiliency counts as revenue, but how do you count revenue that hasn't showed up yet? All the difficulties of doing public financing is there. So you need help. You need to work with folks to build these kinds of things. But the best part is what you need gives you value and always pays for itself because you are essentially monetizing the sun. And by monetizing the sun, you're not affected by things like we all know our gas prices are about to go up at the pump because of, things happening across the planet. That doesn't happen to sunshine. Sunshine doesn't go up in price tomorrow. Now, does that mean we have more sunshine or less sunshine each day? Well, of course, yeah, we understand that. But the whole idea is if you can get off of commodity-based energy systems and go onto electric-based energy systems where you can control that electricity at a much more granular level, much more secure level, absolutely worth it. And that's one of the reasons I'm involved in electrification. But it does provide you with value. So it means you can use creative financing tools, especially other people's money. And I love Heather's example because this really does fit well for most people in Ohio, in the Midwest, across the country with older infrastructure that needs to be upgraded first before they can do energy savings type concepts like microgrids, which of course is what we're talking about here today. But there is something new. And the funny thing is, I talked to Heather about this beforehand, and she said, it's not new. We did it. Everybody who has a community right now, if you're representing a community and somebody wants to bring a data center to your community, they're probably doing a development agreement because it's probably in a commercial industrial area and they need to make sure they have the utilities that they have necessary to be able to operate that. Not the electric alone, which everybody talks about, but everything else that you need to have, the roads, the sewer, the water, all that kind of stuff. Well, that development agreement, you can ask them to pay for your microgrid, the infrastructure that they need, the capacity they need to add to the electric grid could be provided partially by your microgrids. So you could explore that. That is not a common thing to think of, but Heather said it actually happened. It happened in Hammond back in 2019. Do you want to do a quick story? Because we have 3 minutes before we go officially to Q&A.
No, sure. That was kind of when the data centers started becoming a really hot topic in our state. I know it's a big topic right now, and it's a lot of conversations being had about it. But it was one of the last development agreements actually I was a part of. And so utilizing a space that was unusable for any other purpose due to it being a former utility plant and the remediation that would have to occur on that site, should it be used for residential or commercial. It was right on the lake, so great place to use for a great place to have for either of those uses, except for the remediation costs. So we were approached by a data center who wanted to build. So worked through the development agreement with them. They utilize the lake water for cooling. So it's been I think a good partnership. I did move to Leopardo shortly after that, but I believe it's been a good partnership for the city. There's expansion plans, and so certainly there's a lot of value in having these conversations. If you have areas in which that there's interest for these data centers, ensuring that you're getting what you can for your residents from the deal as well. There's a lot that you can move over and or discuss over a development agreement and really make sure that you're getting everything you can out of it.
All right, and we are now at the end of the review. By the way, if anybody did not notice, anybody's been around for a while, Green Energy Ohio has changed their logo, and you will kind of notice that it lines up a lot with what this whole series has been about. You've got savings and value, you've got controls, you've got solar, you've got storage, all the components of a microgrid or distributed energy resources is Green Energy Ohio's new focus, and that's the update on our logo that our board approved just at the end of last year. I do not see any other questions past the non-recourse loan, so get your questions in the chat. Meanwhile, this is the contact information if you need to get a hold of Heather. So hngaray at leopardoenergy.com. And of course, you can always get a hold of me either at the greenenergyohio.org, info at greenenergyohio.org, or to me at my business, Michael at Command Consulting LLC. Don't forget the LLC. They wanted to charge $5,000 if I wanted to do the one without the LLC, .com. So I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Does anybody want to do a verbal one? Because we do have enough time. If somebody wants to do a verbal one, you can unmute and go ahead and ask your question verbally. And if we get done early, we will just be done early, which I'm shocked. Financing is confusing and hard. Something popped up. Oh, thank you, Edward. The non-recourse loan, the whole idea is that they wouldn't have what I read very quickly was they can only go after your collateral, but it could be, financed with a guarantee of savings. So,
Yeah, I think I was a little confused by the format of Edward's question. So I mean, it is very similar to that concept. They're evaluating the savings. They're getting the scope. The idea that a bank is realistically going to come in and take out an HVAC system from a police station is highly unlikely, but yes, it's evaluated in a very similar manner.
No, Edward, do not apologize. You're fine.
And there,
All
and
questions are
honestly,
good.
the statute itself allows for these specific financing mechanisms to be utilized and excludes it from the municipalities' uh, net indebtedness calculations for some. But we've worked with communities who have done this through a geo bond where they issue one a year and they want to pull it in. We're working with one right now that's evaluating that. We've worked with a community that is financing this out of cash reserve. So there's not one way to do it. The one we spoke about is particularly beneficial to communities who either don't have the cash on hand or don't want to go through the full bond process for whatever reasons.
I can answer Joyce's question about a universal target ROI. If you are looking at things from a municipal only perspective, any return that pays for the cost, if it ends up being cost neutral or any be above or better than cost neutral, that's good. They don't have to get an ROI to make money. That you're not in business as a municipality to make revenue or return. However, if there is enough return, then you can attract investors. So it really depends on the type of investor. It used to be that tax investors were big ones for these kind of properties or these kind of projects because there was tax abatements in all of it. Now there's still tax abatement available in operating the battery. So it's still available for you to get an ROI there, but it really just depends on who the financier is. I'll give one example. Every microgrid project that I have put together, I have not had a failure with getting an investor. So the ROI was enough for that investor to get their money back, whether they're trying to get a 10% or whether they're trying to just get 5%. It really just depends on what you're trying to do because maybe monetizing the sun is a better bet than a bond. I mean, bonds are pretty secure. But if you're going to go invest in some crazy AI stock, you should probably hedge that bet by doing something that monetizes the sun. So, willingness for Ohio State funding agencies. All right, so I'm going to guess, Philip, that you're talking about using things like development finance authorities or finance authorities like that. One, grant funding could always be used if you can get grant funding. A lot of these were done with grant funding before, that really not available today. The use of a finance authority, I'll give one example that I'm familiar with. Summit County, Ohio, has a development finance authority that was built on the port of their airport that they have in Akron. So that development finance authority could absolutely look at this because they could do a longer term, lower return loan. So there's where you can talk about something that only gets you 3 or 4% back, something like that, or a shared revenue between the finance authority and the municipality, or being able to just leverage the monies that are available through green banks, things like that. So absolutely, it's available. But I think, Philip, what you are hitting on is municipalities don't recognize what they need to ask for. That's why we did this whole series. This microgrid education series is to let people know that one, you need these. Two, they're affordable. Three, they're actually a revenue potential available to you in multiple ways for you to get them, which of course is the combination of this session. So this is really about raising the awareness of municipalities about their electric bills are going up, demand is going up, and the grid gets worse. So what can you do about it? Well, you can have your own miniature version of the grid, and the fuel source that you're going to use is going to be sunshine, which nobody has to worry about that there's a war on the other side of the world that's going to screw up the cost for sunshine every day. So that's one of the side benefits, more of that cybersecurity or international security, which was on session two that we covered. So that's pretty good too. Any comment on that, Heather? As far as
Yeah,
because
I
she
mean, I
because
would say
yeah,
that
because you're
one of
doing
the
it.
things
Yeah.
I would say one of the things I just to again reiterate is that we really like to look at these things is, a master plan approach. A lot of the communities we work with, we structure this as okay, let's come in and do a pilot program first. Let's look at your long-term goals. Sometimes going, straight to step 10 is a little bit scary and there's a little bit of hesitation to get everybody on board with that. So if we look at, okay, this is where we want to end up, what are the steps we need to take to get there, and really position it through an ESPC program. So you're using budget dollars that you're spending today and just reinvesting them better tomorrow, I think is a really good approach. And it makes you think about what do we need to build in order to protect that future investment. And that's when you gain that kind of comfort and trust with the community, residents, key staff members, the administration, council, mayors, really getting everybody to understand the concept so that that next step of, okay, how do we advance this next goal becomes a little bit easier. And we're happy to work with you to find opportunities for grant funding. But I've not seen from the examples that were proposed in the comments, I've not seen any activity based on those funding agencies in particular.
Yeah, I think the community development block grants are going to be more for housing or
Those are
commercial
pretty
development.
restrictive as
Yeah.
far as at least in Indiana, I've not done any work with
Yep.
CDBG in Ohio, but they often come with a whole lot of paperwork and follow-ups and tend to be rather restrictive. But that's not to say there's not another entity that's looking at these types of projects and providing funding as well.
And Philip mentioned the Ohio Public Works Commission offering 0% interest loans. It all depends on if the project meets the requirements, what they're trying to do. I'll give an example. The Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District looked into some solar and had somebody talk to them about solar, but I don't think they actually looked at microgrids specifically because if you want to build something like this for a water treatment plant, a wastewater treatment plant, then you are going to have to, again, design it and size it for that resilient need. And if you only look at the effects of the plant by itself, that's not enough. Heather kind of mentioned that the scope that you want to look at is, you want to make sure it's a big enough scope, but also you need to look at the ability to operate as a virtual power plant. In other words, sell energy back into the PJM marketplace. That only became possible for smaller behind the meter systems because of House Bill 15. So House Bill 15 is what's made it possible for a bunch of small systems to can be operated together as one larger system. If you were already a big commercial, big industrial project that had your own substation, you could already do that because you were connected right into PJM. But now with House Bill 15, that's only been in effect since August. So it's only been around for like 6 months. So that's why this is relatively new. But the interest, I would say, at least from my perspective, is definitely kicked up because I've been sending some projects toward Leopardo's way. Some folks that are interested. All right, we are at the end. So the final note we have, other than thanking Heather very much for your wonderful presentation, you did a great job. The next session is the final session. We're going to put all of this together. We're going to see where the world is going, the energy transition. We're going to learn lessons from someone who went through Hurricane Helene and what they're doing down in North Carolina. The lesson learned there is don't learn the lesson again. Use their lesson. Let them teach you so you know what to do at your municipality. Build your microgrids now. Don't wait till late. But one of the things I wanted to show is one of the slides we will talk about in 2 weeks, which is that electrification is really new, but now available across the board. This is the part people don't realize. If we were talking right around 9/11, only 25% of buildings, industry, and transportation could be electrified. So 25 years later, 75% can be electrified, and the 25% that can't is the really hard stuff. High temperature manufacturing, flight, and shipping. Everything else can be electrified now. And that level of power is, or level of capability is new. It's not new technology, it's just newly available or newly able to be applied to your situation. And yeah, Joyce, you can actually look up online at any time and see how many people are out of power right now. Just because of the rain, just because of snow. And I mentioned that earlier on that calculator. I can actually calculate what that's worth to those communities. So thank you very much for your questions. Heather, love seeing you. Thank you very much. Take care. And everyone, enjoy your week. It's going to be a wet one, but that means flowers. I've already seen crocuses around me, so this is crazy. So goodbye, be well, and be safe.
Thank you, everyone.